Well, it's that time again. We hope you guys are blessed. Hope you're good there at your home. And we hope this message encourages you today. And so we just, from Toa Christian Church, we want to say thank you for taking your time to join us here today. And that's why we always want this to be a huge blessing for you as it is for us. And as well, we hope that this honors God, honors His Word, and just really makes our life and our faith deeper with God. And so stick around, join us for prayer, some worship, and a message that we hope is sweet to you. And stick around after the message. We're going to have Talk It Over, where we have communion together and we share our faith with one another, discuss the message. So you're welcome to join us there. Don't be afraid to let us know you're here. Write us in the comments. Let us know how we can pray for you, or how to encourage you, or anything you might need. Let us know even now. So we love you guys. We look forward to seeing you in person, though, real soon. God bless every single one of you, even now.
I stand before you now, the greatness of your renown. I have heard of the majesty and wonder of you, King of heaven. In humility I bow as your love, wave after wave, crashes over me, crashes over me. For you are for us, you are not against us. Champion of heaven, you made a way for all to enter in. I have heard you calling my name. I have heard the song of love that you sing. So I will let you draw me out beyond the shore into your grace. Oh, your grace, because your love, wave after wave, crashes over me, crashes over me. For you are for us,
Well, good morning, everybody. God bless every single one of you. I'm going to start today's message as I have been for the past few weeks with our TBCC mission statement that says we are a community transformed by God's grace to bear fruit because we are the church. It's what God is doing, putting a community together. Not that we deserve it or working for it or earning it. This is what He builds, all because of His grace. And that's something that you and I have to receive and reach out for, that God just freely gives. And as He does that, fruit will come to be a part of that as lives change and hearts and minds change and people's minds and hearts get healed, and they receive the gift of God that comes through Jesus Christ, and that's His church, because we are His church that He is building. Not that we think we got it all right and we do everything perfect, but because God does things right and because God is perfect. And so we're going to keep moving on. We're still on our new series. It's not new anymore. This is week number 3, part 3 that we're going through right now. That's called Home. And, home is where the heart is. Home, sweet home, and there's no place like home. And you've been in work and stressful situations. Where do you want to go? I just want to go home. And that's why we need our home to be a blessing. And by the way, when I speak and say the word home, I am talking about where you are. I'm talking about your house. I'm talking about the church. I'm talking about all these places where the Father dwells, where His children are, is where He dwells, and that is where you have your being and where home is. And what a beautiful thing, but how rough it can be sometimes, and the things that happen at home and what you have to protect and how you deal with your time at home. This is why last week, as I brought up the issue of rest. Everybody that's watching this, say the word rest. Maybe you should be saying, I need to rest right now. Rest is such a beautiful word, and it's one of these huge promises from God through Jesus Christ into His people, into the home, that He shoves out into the churches. His voice is that echoes throughout all people and says, Jesus said in Matthew 11:28, come to me, right? All of you who are weary and burdened. I mean, who is He talking about? Like, you, me, everybody that you know. How many people right now that I've spoke to recently is struggling with the anxieties and the pressures and the pain and death and all these kinds of situations that's going on all the way around us. And yet here Jesus, the promise still stands. Come to me, all of you, because all of us face this struggle, these burdens, man. We feel the weight and like we carry that backpack around, and like Joshua said from his video on Thursday on our TBCC page, it's like this beautiful invitation of Jesus into our life. Come to me, I will give you rest. And how many of us need that? And where do we truly find that rest? We're going to find it in Jesus the Christ, the Messiah, who has bought us by His own blood, who has been our sacrifice. Not that we can forgive ourselves, maybe some things we need to forget and let go of past and be fully in the present. But Jesus says right now, come to me and I will give you rest. And I think that offer is always on the table, and it's on the table right now. And maybe that's a decision you have to make, that Jesus calls you and it's like, I'm going to go to Jesus right here where I'm at. Even with all the stuff and all my bags packed, and this anxiety and this pressure that I feel and the fear, I'm gonna let Him sort of clothe me with that rest. And I want to share this because 6 times that I know of in the Gospels where Jesus went out alone, even He Himself left the crowds. He left all these other people and these hurting people and all this stuff, and His disciples, the apostles, where He went out alone to spend time with the Father. You got all the Luke 4, 5, 6, Luke 22, Mark 6, Matthew 14, all these different places, which is interesting because these are mostly mentioned in the Gospel of Luke. And we know Luke was a doctor. Luke was a physician. So it's just interesting that he wanted to specifically highlight the fact that Jesus would go out here for this reason, to rest. And that goes into that word reason. There is a reason for this. There's a reason why Jesus would go out and do those things in solitude and desolate places, because he was preparing. And I'm here as a 100% somebody that's trying to encourage and teach us that all the way around us, people truly need to rest, but there's a reason for the rest. There's a reason when Jesus went out in those places, because he was preparing. I mean, the temptations of Jesus, he went out alone, into the wilderness, where he was going to be tested by the devil himself. That's throwing out these things that might not even be temptations for you and I, but for him, they had to put the pressure on him, of which he successfully defeated the devil. But he found his strength in a lot of these different places. I think that's the example for you and I. And we're not Jesus. But we have to rest and we have to find it. And the reason for us is to prepare. We're preparing for things that who knows what's around the corner. And maybe some of us, you're thinking like, man, I didn't use my time wisely 2 years ago. I'd be stronger during these days today. How many of us look at our lives and say, man, if I would have made this choice 6 months ago or 3 years ago, started exercising then and started eating healthy then, and activated sort of my faith and started praying then, I might be a little bit different than I am today. So when we rest, it's not just to do nothing. Maybe there's a moment for that, okay, to be lazy. Okay, you got the green light sometimes for that. But I think that when we rest, is the reason is because we're preparing. And every time Jesus went out, it's because he's preparing for things that were coming in the near future, for hardships, for trials, for people, for struggles, for a crucifixion. And he is our example that we follow in his footsteps. And you and I think that we have some resting to do, because it leads us into preparing for whatever this world throws at us. And we know good and well right now, it can throw anything at us. I mean, we're all living in days and times that I never thought or dreamed that we'd be living in a pandemic. It just never really crossed my mind before that we'd be living stuff like this. So right now it's like anything is possible. And this is not about resting to the point of hiding. I don't want us to hide. It's not about hiding from troubles. One thing you never see about Jesus is he's never out there hiding. Right? When he goes away, he is preparing. When Jesus rests, he is preparing. When you and I rest, it is to prepare. It's for strength. It's for us to do battle. It's for us to take on those things that bring affliction our way. For those things that get in your head and need to come out of your head. For those things that get in your heart and try to stick in there, troubles, and not only just for yourself, but for other people. We have to prepare. Never hide. And so I want to give you, like a couple of texts here today. Ecclesiastes. Everybody knows this verse, I think. And I'm not going to read the whole line. If you want to check out Ecclesiastes chapter 3, says, very famous, popular words where he says, for everything there is a season, a time for every activity under heaven. And then the writer of Ecclesiastes starts just railing on this series of time. There's a time to live, a time to die. There's like a balance. There's a time for peace, a time for war. There's a time to mourn. There's a time to dance. And he brings this massive balance of life and perspective, that there's beauty, but there's also evil. I mean, there's goodness, but there's also darkness attached to this life, and because we live between the trees, between Genesis and Revelation, and we're not in heaven yet. We're on earth where there's good and there's bad. There's man, we live in crazy days right now, and in these days there is a time for everything. There's a time for you to rest. There's a time to prepare, but there's also a time to do battle. There's a time to move forward. There is a time for movement. There's a time to pray. There's a time, really for every activity. I know that we tell stories like, you remember that time? You remember that time that, I was thinking about stories about time. And the most recent ones, like in a couple of years, we'll be looking at each other saying, you remember that time COVID-19 kind of shut us down for a couple of months? Do you remember that time? For me, I look at my wife. You remember that time when Lorenzo was born? I was scared, and I changed his first diaper, and I didn't know what I was doing. We tell stories like that, and I think that's how we encourage us to to press us forward. And I heard somebody, I don't remember where I heard this from, but somebody said recently, well, up north in the United States, people say once upon a time, but down south they say, you're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you. And I'm going to kind of go into a story like that right out of the Old Testament, a story that people would have told dealing with time. As people, they weren't resting, they weren't preparing, they were just kind of sitting down doing nothing. That's very different. And what we do is we prepare in the time that we have. And all of us are allotted, we have a series of time, and we have to take advantage of that time. And how many of us are guilty of not taking advantage of the days and the time we have? As it says in the Old Testament, Lord, teach us to number our days. And so I'm going to call this message today time. And there's a time to rest. There's always a time to rest, but we rest and we turn to Jesus, find our satisfaction, our life through the work that he has done. And then he does that to prepare us to use our time wisely, to make a difference in the world around us, to see people's lives change one day at a time, one step by step and day by day. And I know, like, one of the worst things that could happen is your own home, since this series is called Home, and how you spend your time at home, how you rest at home, and what are you preparing for at home. But it's another thing when your home is under attack, and you feel when the weight of the world is in your home, when the pressures come home, and you go to work and you come back home, and all that weight and that pressure comes home with you, and you can't rest anymore at home, and you can't prepare anymore at home. And there's a lot of things going on that cause these kinds of things, but today is kind of under that theme, because a long time ago, and still today, people have been telling this one particular story out of 1 Samuel chapter 14. And they would tell their kids, and their kids would grow up and tell their kids, because they wanted to encourage that next generation to be able to stand up. Like, you got to take advantage of the time that you have to move and encourage the next generation. And so we have this story right out of 1 Samuel 14. I'm going to read a little bit of that. It says, one day Jonathan, this is verse 1. It says, one day Jonathan said to his armor bearer, he says, come on, let us go over to where the Philistines have their outpost. But Jonathan did not tell his father what he was doing. Now, the context of this verse is that the nation of Israel at this time, they were just being baked by the Philistines. I mean, they're literally hiding in holes in the ground. They are not resting in holes in the ground. They're hiding from the problem. They're hiding from the military advances of the Philistines, who outnumbered them and outpowered them in military strength. And so you have the nation of Israel literally hiding in holes in the ground. And so this is obviously there so that we would say, you remember that time when Jonathan did this to encourage other people to be able to move forward. And he doesn't do this alone. He has his armor bearer with him. And I think it's interesting. He doesn't tell his father what he's doing. And if you go a verse later, it says, no one realized that Jonathan had left the Israelite camp. And I think this is important because a lot of people like to do things for show. Let me show you this performance. And that's not what this is about. This is about, we rest because we prepare, because when the day of evil comes, when the problems come, which they do, they will, they are here already, we rest so that we can prepare so that we will do something about it. But it's not about ever putting on any kind of show or performance. This is about real life, real flesh and blood, real the problems that we face and how to cope and how to deal with it. And so the problem that the nation is having at this moment is that they're being bombarded by their enemy, and they can't do anything about it really because they won't stand up and put the pressure back to them because they feel like they'll be defeated. They've already been defeated in their minds. But Jonathan must have been in one of those places like somebody's got to stand up to this. Somebody has to do something. I've been resting. I've been preparing. And now it's time to make a move, And that's why I want to say this is preparing. This is preparing. It's not hiding what Jonathan was doing. He's ready to put pressure on. He's ready to jump out and pounce. He's ready to, I want to change this world around me. He's been rested to do it. But what the nation was doing, they were not preparing and they were hiding. And this is the difference that this story, kind of makes. And so here you have Jonathan says, 1 Samuel 14:6, he says, perhaps, I think it's kind of funny that some people might say, well, that sounds really faithless. But he says, perhaps the Lord will help us. It just sounds funny to me because like the word perhaps. But what's so cool about it, God's not offended by the perhaps. And perhaps, it's like saying maybe, maybe the Lord will help us. Like what I hear when I read that, as I see the mustard seed faith in there. That's like saying, what does Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego say before they put them in the fire there in Babylon? He says, even if the Lord does not save us, we will not bow down to you or your statues or any of this other stuff here in Babylon. But they had this idea, God can save us, he will save us, but if he doesn't, I'm okay with that because I'm not going to bow down to these other things. It's like a perhaps in there, that they're okay with it, and that at least he gave it a shot. So I just find this like this slight prayer. Perhaps, maybe God's going to help us if we do something about this issue because somebody's got to take a stand. And so they go to a Philistine outpost, and they're hiding in these holes and they're about to pounce on the Philistines while Saul, nobody else knows where Jonathan and his armor bearer are. Again, it's not for a show. In 1 Samuel 14:13 says, Jonathan climbed up using his hands and feet, because sometimes the problems that we face, they require you on all fours, man. It's like 4-wheel drive. It's going to be tough to get out of this pit. Okay, that anxiety, that fear, that stress that you're going through, that problem, that doubt, that worry, that loss, man. It's going to take all of you to keep pressing forward in your life on behalf of other people around you, on your own heart, mind, and soul, and what God has for you. It might require you to use your hands and feet to get out of that mire, out of that pit. And here, Jonathan, maybe God will help us. They're going to surprise attack the enemy and ultimately change the tides of this battle and this war. Jonathan climbed up using his hands and feet with his armor bearer right behind him. This is very important. Your strength is behind you. Your support is right there with you. This is very important. This is why we have to have that community around us. At least somebody that knows what you're going through, that is with you in support. And the armor bearer was right with him. And Jonathan, it says the Philistines fell before Jonathan, and his armor bearer followed and killed behind him. They end up, if you read 1 Samuel chapter 14, they took out 20 Philistines. Just two of Jonathan and his armor bearer. 20 Philistines in a land size the size of a half of an acre. These guys went to work. And I put this on the screen here, unnoticed, because a lot of the stuff you do for God might seem to be up front unnoticed. You rested, you prepared to go out for battle, and what? Many of us don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. You're supposed to give and pray and fast and do things that are in secret, behind closed door. And that might be unnoticed, and maybe you feel that right now. Like, I feel like I'm serving God, but it's just not noticed. And but man, what did Jesus say? Like, what you do in secret, your Father will make open for everybody. And here's like case in point for Jonathan and his armor bearer, not putting on any kind of show. They're just sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I'm going to do something about that. I've rested, I prepared, and I'm going to change the tides. I'm going to change the tides of this battle. And they bum rush, literally, the Philistine enemy, and took out 20. And the rest of the Israelites saw this, and they're like, who did this? Like, who started this? They're unnoticed. And it caught up to them pretty fast. They're going to realize who did this. And they changed the tide of the whole war. An outmanned army, an outgunned army changed the tide because one person decided to make a difference. They took their stand. And you have to know this. You have to believe this about you and God. Listen, if you feel alone, whatever you feel right now and the weight of this world that we live in, you plus God always make a majority. I mean, God is always about taking something that has the appearance or literally is weak and making nothing but strength and wisdom out of what appeared weak. That is exactly what God does. But the job that you and I have is that we rest and we prepare and we start, I don't like this phrase, but it's kind of like weaponizing our faith a little bit. Not to hurt anybody, but to make a difference. Like, it is a tool to be used in our tool belt that we defend, that we work, we live, and we faith into society, and we live and we love in that society. But you have to take your stand. And maybe for some of you, this is just looking to the mirror and telling your, as crazy it might sound, like this worry, this fear and this other stuff that goes in these compartments of my mind, you got to come out, man. I'm taking my stand against this. And how do we take our stand? How do we prepare? Study God's word, pray, be in a community, even if that's online, and you tell somebody what you're going through so that they can also be like an armor bearer to you to turn the tides and the battles that we're facing. These words were written to encourage us, to inspire us, you, to take your stand right in your home. And you know what? Right now you have the time to do it. And there's a time for everything, right? That's why I want to center a little bit on that time. And we look back and say, I wish I would have done this back in that time. But right now you do have the time to encourage, to build your faith, to change the tides of things going on around, maybe even in your community. But it's always, before you go out there and start messing with somebody else or any of that, what Jesus said, get the plank out of your own eye so you can see clearly to help somebody that has dust in their eye. So it starts at home with you taking advantage of the time that you have. But you have to take your stand. And when you take your stand, it becomes a turning point. Just like Jonathan climbing out. The whole nation of Israel never expected, man. That's how God worked. You never expected this backdoor avenue, how God was going to come in to change the tide and change the season and change the battle and change what you thought was going to go down because somebody decided in their time to take a stand, especially while their home was under attack. And you and I, we have a privilege to take a stand, but you have the power to take a stand. You have a power to use your time today in your home. You have that right. You have that privilege, and you got to take advantage of it. And you create these turning points where lives change. And it starts at home with you, right where you are. I know we shared this verse many times a couple of weeks ago from Hebrews 10:24, and it says, and let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds. The writer of Hebrews, trying to push those, to consider those turning points, take your stand, even in those battles, we get behind each other and we encourage one another. And you got to put on your armor and then you become like an armor bearer, not even for yourself, for your home, but for others that are around you. How powerful, how important, but also how beautiful. And I don't want you to ever feel like you're alone. Some people feel like they're alone in this battle, the battles they face in life, and don't know. Maybe you're an introvert and you're like, I don't know how to reach out for help, man. But there's never been a better time than now to reach out to somebody. Say, hey, sit down, talk. Let me tell you what I'm feeling. I wouldn't suggest go out and tell the world, but you tell somebody so that somebody can encourage you, so that somebody can help you. Take advantage of that time and encourage you to press you forward, to keep pushing in through the pain, And I would say this is like where you become a fighter. To fight and press. You rest so that you can prepare, and you take advantage of your time, and you're not alone because this is a community effort. And I think how powerful, and I want to give you this text to conclude. And maybe you're saying this at home, but where's my backup? Where's my strength and where's my backup? And that's where you and I have that how do I say it? You and I have that privilege to be each other's backup, to be each other, just like that armor bearer was for Jonathan, because in order to change the tide of this war, Jonathan probably would have been destroyed on his own, but because he had his armor bearer there, it changed everything, and they took their stand. And I think with God, it doesn't take much, because he uses what's weak to change this world. As long as you and I take our time and make those decisions while we have that time. And Ephesians 6:10 says, maybe you know it, Ephesians 6, man, the full armor chapter. And I'm going to conclude with this but it doesn't finish the message, right? And we're going to have more content on this coming later, but he says, finally be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. And the reason for that, you're going to have to be strong in the Lord, in your knowledge and your strength and your spirituality that happens in your connection with our Father in heaven. Be strong in him. See, this is when you rest in the Lord and you put your faith and your hope in him, and your knowledge, and all that, and your love into God. I think this is where he strengthens you to be able to endure and cope, but also press back. Because through those things, he changes the tide of the battle. And I'm just going to end with this verse, like at the top, because the list, like the full armor of God is a whole powerful list that we're going to continue to go through. He says, put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. And there's always kind of traps out there. There's all kinds of schemes and things that to try to bait us so that we would fall, so that we would go under these other kind of traps that might have been laid for us. But here, the clear call in the New Testament and the message for you and I is to put on that full armor so that we can do what? So that you can take your stand right there at home. And as I say this a lot, and I just said it a few minutes ago, but you know what? There's never been a better time than now. And how you use that time, the decisions in your time that you make today are so powerful and so important, because those decisions in the time you make today are going to affect the time that you experience tomorrow and the next day and the next day. We encourage you today, read Ephesians chapter 6, and we're going to have more content come out this week on these verses to put on this full armor that God provides for us. And see, not only does God provide rest for us, that we can have full confidence in him, but he also provides us with the armor and the tools that we need so that we can take our stand. God bless every single one of you. And seriously, maybe you're going through something right now where you need to take a stand. Maybe you need a turning point. Maybe you feel like you, the nation of Israel, has been hiding. And you come to that time and you're like, enough is enough. I've had enough of this. Now it's time to take a stand. I'm not going to live like this one more minute. It's time for us to change. It's time for us to study. It's time for you to pray. It's time to move forward and change the tide of these battles. God bless every single one of you. And may God give you, exactly what you need right now as you take your stand in the time that we have. Father God, we thank you for loving us. We thank you for encouraging us. We thank you for everything that you give us in the time that we're in. But I pray that you would encourage us and lead us to be able to use the time that we have to take a stand, to create turning points. But Lord, we know that will happen as we rest in you, as we trust in you, as we find our strength in you. But let us, Lord, even today start to put on, where those that don't have it, they start putting on, this whole full, complete armor set, so that we can take our stand against the devil's schemes, against the battles that come our way, against these forces that sometimes apply themselves in our hearts and our minds, that you give us this time to create turning points, to change the tide. And I pray for everybody right now, God, watching this, that has any kind of anxiety or fear, that you would just sort of pour in your grace. And as your grace pours in, it would just sort of press out the fears. Because we know perfect love casts out all fear. Give us today the power and strength to trust in you. And we love you for what you do for us and for loving us. And may this day, God, we be changed. May we take our stand in those places where we need to stand up the most. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you all today. We love you. We got your back. Let us know how we can pray for you. And man, God bless every single one of you today. Listen, if you need to make a decision for Jesus, there's never been a better time than now. God bless you all. Love him, trust him, because he loves you. Amen. We hope to see you soon.